Hey guys, and welcome to Wrestling Days. So in today's video I wanted to have a look at brand extensions and brand splits. There's a lot of talk at the moment that this could be returning, and so I wanted to have a look back at the original brand split, the original brand extension, see if it worked, see if it might work this time around. There's definitely pros and cons, and to be honest, I'm not sure. I honestly don't know if I'm for it or if I'm against it. I think there's strong arguments for it. I think there's strong arguments against as well. Really, to go back to this, you're going back to the Monday Night Wars, and it was WCW going up against WWF. The wars came to an end. WWF emerged victorious for several reasons, which we won't go into here. But WWF found itself getting a lot of new talent. It bought WCW. It also, around this time, bought ECW as well. So it had a lot of influx of new talent. The decision was made at first in 2001 to give WCW the end of Raw. So Raw would actually finish, and then there'd be a match, a WCW match, and they would change the commentary team, they would change the look of Raw, and they, would then give that time over. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, and it didn't really work. Viewers used to just, tune out, weren't interested in this one-off match or a couple of matches or whatever. So giving it the end of Raw didn't work. They needed separate brands. Now, in my opinion, foolishly, the WCW name was dropped, and instead the brand split was, in 2002, decided as Raw and SmackDown. That's the way they went. Would have made so much more sense to have had WWE or WWF and WCW, but they didn't go that way. This is also coinciding with a storyline where Ric Flair owns half of WWF, WWE, and Vince owns the other half. So it was decided in 2002 that Ric Flair would run Raw and Vince would run SmackDown. And so there was a draft, and in this draft they were allowed to pick, on TV they were allowed to pick 10 each, and then more were selected on WWE.com. SmackDown got the likes of Rock, Benoit, Angle, Hogan, Billy and Chuck, whereas Raw got the likes of Undertaker, NWO, Booker T, Kane, and as I said, the kind of rest of the card was filled out from WWE.com. And then, they split the championships up. The undisputed champion, the women's champion, were free to go between SmackDown and Raw. But the other titles, eventually it was decided that there would be two tag team champions. That'd be the World Tag Champions, and then there'd be the WWE Tag Champions as well. And so each brand would have its own tag team championship. They also split up kind of the secondary titles as well. And then they started to split up pay-per-views. There's a few changes that came out of this that still remain today. The likes of the touring schedule. Used to be 200 dates. That drastically increased to 350 because now they had two touring parties. They obviously had the Raw touring party and the SmackDown touring party. That still remains today. They don't do it as Raw and SmackDown. They do it more as an A show and a B show. Tends to be you get the world champion on one, and then you get a big name on the second one. So at the moment, Roman Reigns would be on one, but then you might get Dean Ambrose on the other tour, headlining that with, say, Kevin Owens or somebody, and then the rest of the card just split. So that's a positive thing. More opportunities to see WWE. They also split up a lot of the pay-per-views and introduced several new ones as well. The likes of Cyber Sunday, Bad Blood. These were all specific to certain either Raw or SmackDown. They left the big ones like Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, even King of the Ring at the time. that was really the only opportunity, or was meant to be the only opportunity, where the two brands would collide. Royal Rumble, for example, had 15 off each brand. Eventually, that Undisputed Championship broke up into a world title and the WWE title, and they went to the different brands as well. So if a SmackDown guy was to win, then he would face whoever his champion was at WrestleMania, and then there'd be some kind of tournament to decide who would face the Raw champion at WrestleMania. King of the Ring, they normally split the entries 50-50, and as you said, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, again just 50-50 of the top matches from each brand. You still had additional pay-per-views and more pay-per-views, and I suppose in this day and age that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of time. You're not going to have to shell out $60 odd to watch all these different pay-per-views, and that was the problem before. People didn't have all of that money to just constantly keep buying all of these pay-per-views. Now you've got the network, it kind of makes a bit more sense, doesn't it? You pay your $9.99 a month, and then bang, that's it. You just enjoy any and all the pay-per-views. I mean, WWE are at the point now where they're just literally making pay-per-views, live specials, basically filming house shows, and which is kind of what Roadblock was. So they're kind of doing, getting pay-per-views through and additional pay-per-views. Might as well make it mean something. So for me, that would be a big advantage of a brand split now. The problem with the brand split, and the brand split ran from 2002 to 2011, really up until 2006, because it very, very quickly was not being followed. It very quickly, prime example would be the Hardys. They broke the Hardy Boys up. I think Matt went to SmackDown and Jeff went to Raw. By the time you're getting around to the likes of ECW joining the party, which I think was about 2006, they introduced a third brand. You had Matt and Jeff teaming up, so that's the SmackDown guy and a Raw guy, teaming up at an ECW event. That's how blurred the lines got. And all throughout this brand split, there's examples of people jumping lines, and the draft was brilliant. Every year they would draft the stars. You'd be able to trade superstars, and it was very exciting. That's a real positive. That would be a fantastic Raw every year to look forward to. So that would be another advantage of it coming back. But it has to be followed. These different brands are different brands. It's as different as Ring of Honor is to NXT. You can't have people just popping up and appearing, on a regular basis. But that temptation is always going to be there, because these are all under the WWE banner. As a result of all this, as a result of people not having, the money to be able to buy all of these pay-per-views, the fact that the lines were getting very blurred, it was decided in 2011 to just put an end to the brand extension, and so 2011 it all went back to being under the one umbrella. Absolutely, the winner was SmackDown. SmackDown, I remember Paul Heyman telling a fantastic story on a podcast where he had dialed into the SmackDown phone call and conference call, because he was a writer for SmackDown at the time, and Vince was on it, and they were talking about what they were going to do on SmackDown. And then at the end of the call, they would all have to go off the line, and then the Raw team would jump on. And he was saying that this one day he was doing the SmackDown thing, and he was feeling a bit tired, and he fell asleep. Right? He was proper embarrassed about it. Didn't want anyone to find out. For whatever reason, didn't get in trouble, but he fell asleep. Right? When he wakes up, there's no calls or anything whatsoever. So he doesn't think anything about it. Just carries on. Yeah, he's a bit embarrassed about it. Doesn't mention it. Gets called to Vince's office, and Vince sits him down and absolutely rips into him, but doesn't rip into him for falling asleep. Vince doesn't even know that's happened. rips into him because he wants to know why his telephone number has appeared as a number that was still present during the Raw conversations. That is how serious the writers were taking this. You know, it wasn't coming across on the screen at times, but there were certainly times where the Raw team and the SmackDown team were being, you know, pitted against each other. Paul Heyman tells a brilliant story. The end to the story is that, you know, he took this on the chin and whatnot. And he says what Vince doesn't realise is that week was probably the only week he didn't listen into the Raw conference call, because he actually had fallen asleep. In all the previous weeks, he had been staying on the line and listening to it and nicking their ideas. So it's a brilliant story from Paul Heyman. But what's really great about this time was that SmackDown was allowed to shine. It was a separate show. It was a different show. And it really benefited from it. Raw suffered, though. Raw suffered because Triple H was kind of left to do whatever he wanted, and what he wanted was to be the man. And so he was burying Booker T. He was burying everyone Kane in that stupid Katie Vick storyline. And he was really building himself up as the guy. And who was going to stop him? Who was going to stop him? He was in a relationship with Steph. You know, he was obviously in with Vince. And he could just do whatever he wanted. Now, granted, that's got nothing much to do with the brand extension, but the fact of the matter is that Vince's focus was kind of split between SmackDown and between ECW and between Raw. Whereas, you know, where you've got just one story, one constant flowing story, Vince's focus is going to solely be on that. And so you can't really afford to have a Triple H kind of ego, if you will. I say that, but we know that we've just lived through the dominance that is John Cena, and now we're going through the dominance of Roman Reigns. But there is my next concern. Would a brand split now just mean that it's going to be Roman Raw and Cena SmackDown? Is that it? You know, do you have to put up with that? What does work is that the talent underneath gets exposed a little more. You know, the likes of Tyler Breeze, if he was on SmackDown, would stand a much better chance of getting on SmackDown every single week, getting a feud and being showcased. It would also mean SmackDown was must-see, same as Raw. So, you know, it really strengthens those two shows. The secondary shows as well, you know, main event, superstars, they could be tied to one of the big shows each, and so then they've got further platform to promote. The network means that you know, you can put as many pay-per-views on as you want and people will watch them because they're only paying $9.99 a month. There's a lot of wins here, and I suppose for that reason I lean towards a brand split, because I'm interested to see it's something different. But equally, why would you want to limit yourself? You know, why, if AJ Styles is on SmackDown and you've got Roman Reigns on Raw, why would you're never going to see Styles against Roman Reigns? Or if you are, it's going to have to be because they've been drafted onto the same show. You know, they have got to keep the lines very, very tight if they do it this time. You simply cannot afford to just keep jumping around, otherwise there is no brand split, and it becomes irrelevant. I think after talking through it, after thinking about the advantages, you know, I think I'd be all right with it. Maybe it doesn't have to be Raw and SmackDown. I think they would go that way. I think the brands of Raw and the brand of SmackDown is, you know, established. So I suppose in that sense, you know, you would go that way. Or who knows? Maybe you go WWE, Raw, NXT on a Thursday, and then, you know, developmental gets a new name. So it's WWE and NXT, and then you've got Florida Developmental Wrestling, FDW or something. Cool. Really appreciate you watching. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter at Wrestling Days UK. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, it'd be brilliant if you did, because got millions more videos on the way for you. And hopefully see you again next time. Bye for now.